What's up, guys? You are watching Fight Feed, and we are officially back with the UFC Fight Night in Paris that is happening next weekend on, I always forget the dates that these fights happen on for whatever reason. I believe it is on September 6th, next Saturday. Super excited for this card, guys. This card is a low-key sleeper. After going through every single fight, making my predictions, I realized how many fights are on the card and how many of these fights are actually pretty hard to decide on. And so you're going to see all of that in this breakdown because I am going through the entire fight card for UFC Paris happening on September 6th from start all the way to the finish. The main event being a huge title contention, potential title contention between Imavov and Borralho. We shall see who gets the win here, guys, and who may get that crack at the new king in Khamzat Chimaev. Now, before I dive in, here's a quick message from our sponsor. If you aren't subscribed to Fight Feed, you! All right, guys, to start off this card, we've got one of the best fights in this new generation of the UFC, and that is a banger matchup between Shauna Bannon and Sam Page Hughes. All I gotta say before we dive into breaking down these women is that if you are on the wrong end of the Sam Page, you are going down. Looking at these two women in the UFC, we've got Shauna Bannon, who's 31 years old, 5'5", a 65-inch reach at the 115-pound weight limit, 7-1 record, 2-1 in the UFC. On the other side of the tape, we've got Sam Hughes. This is the Sam Page that I was talking about, 5'5", 64.5-inch reach, 115 pounds, record 10-6, 5-5 in the UFC. Breaking down these styles for fight number one in Shauna Bannon and Sam Hughes. First thing to call out on the side of Shauna Bannon, this is definitely a weakness, but we'll dive into strengths next. But I just want to call out, she has a 44% takedown defense, which is extremely low, probably the lowest that I've actually documented in all of the research that I've done on different fighters. But outside of that, and I think if you look at that takedown defense, it's not the worst in the world because Shauna Bannon is very active off her back. She does like to throw up those submissions. But on the side of her strengths, she's got a very solid karate/kickboxing style. What you're going to notice from her is similar to like a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, very kind of like in and out movement, that open stance from the karate style, and then also using a lot of that lead leg in terms of kicks, throwing a lead side kick. Loves to throw the side kick from both legs, but you will see her use that a lot more, almost in like a Shara Butin style. Definitely a very well-versed kickboxer, karate type fighter. 56% of her wins are by decision. 28% of her wins are by KO. So generally speaking, in a Shauna Bannon matchup, should she get the win, it's likely to be a decision. Now, weaknesses I have for her, very hittable on the feet, doesn't have the greatest skill set in keeping pressure fighters off of her. If you guys watched her last fight, she actually ended up getting head kicked, dropped badly by her opponent. Her opponent was, gosh, I'm forgetting her name, but we're going to see it in the next slide. But she dropped Shauna. Shauna was able to get her in an armbar and ends up winning the fight. But Shauna did not seem to do very well with that fighter because I feel like that fighter was pushing her and getting her on the back foot. And Shauna Bannon, I guess from my perspective, doesn't always seem to be that great at handling pressure type fighters. Now, on the side of Sam Page Hughes, we've got a very herky-jerky Murab type style, if you will. She is not the easiest customer to deal with in the octagon because she obviously brings not only an odd and like unorthodox style, but the way that she's able to mix things up from she's able to mix things up on the feet quite a bit because she's able to also mix in those takedowns where she just has that Murab-like style that it's like I feel like a lot of opponents get worried about Sam Hughes and some of those other attacks that she brings where they almost let their guard down a bit in the striking where she ends up having success. And so on the side of Sam, she is a very decision-heavy style as well. 50% of her wins are by decision, 30% are by sub, 20% by KO. Great pressure from Sam Page Hughes. Now, weaknesses for her, although she has that solid pressure, she can be very open for those big shots on the feet, especially from a big counter striker. Not something that, I mean, it is something to be worried about with Shauna Bannon, but not as much as I would think, previous opponents might have given Sam Hughes. Momentum check for fight number 1. Shauna Bannon, 2-fight win streak. She last fought March 22nd, 2025. Her previous wins, losses, we've got the last 4 fights here. She had that win over Puja Tamar, which is the one I was talking about in terms of landing the head kick on Shauna, but then getting finished with an armbar. Tamar was 9-4 going into that bout. Before that, she has a win over Alice Ardeline, which was a 9-5 opponent going into that fight. Before that, a loss to Brazil, who was 8-3. And then before that, a win over, I'm not sure whose name that is, Grusander, I believe it is, 6-4. Now on the side of Sam Hughes, a 2-fight win streak as well. She last fought on March 15, 2025. Gives you guys a great view here of how the UFC does their matchmaking. They do like to have fighters who are kind of on that similar schedule. And looking at Sam's last 4 fights, she had a win over Luciano, who was 6-1, a win over Dudakova, who was 8-0, a loss to Yaroguai, who was 10-1, and before that, a win over Jake Amarim, who was 6-0. So what I like to see there, guys, is when you look at these records, a lot of the previous opponents Shauna Bannon's fought are, pretty close in terms of their wins and losses, whereas Sam Hughes seems to have gone up and been like the prospect killer, beating the last 3 of her 4 wins, or the last 3 of her 4 fights. Obviously, she lost 1, but got 3 wins. Those 3 wins were over opponents who were either undefeated or only had 1 loss. Taking a look at intangibles and X factors. So the home fighter in this case, guys, I do have somewhat from the side of Shauna Bannon. She's from Ireland, but obviously when we've seen her in the London cards, she definitely gets a big push because she is a European fighter. So I put there that, she's still green in the UFC, and I also think she's going to want to get another W in Europe. So I think that this is definitely going to be something where Shauna is more of that home fighter. Red flags for me, guys, is that she being Shauna, has abysmal takedown defense at 44%. Other variables, though, as I mentioned at the start of this, she has that bad takedown defense, but where she lacks in takedown defense, I think she does make up for having a bit of a strong submission game and having that submission threat, especially off her back. But on the side of Sam Page Hughes, she's not the home fighter. She still has a lot of pressure, though, because she's going to want to keep building on the win streak she's currently on. And because Sam Page, she's got that Sam Page side of her, you don't want to get her angry. She's going to be getting booed, okay? So that is something to call out. I think that she's going to get booed as the American fighter. Another variable I like to call out for Sam Page, she trains out of Fortis MMA. And although Saif Sayoud, I think that's who it is, he is a very loud coach. I really respect Saif Sayoud and Fortis MMA, not only because I get that, like, if you guys might get annoyed with Saif Sayoud because he'll be like in the corner yelling shit the whole time, like, you gotta go, throw two, and like he's like fucking coaching the whole time. But I really respect it because you can tell how much passion he has and how much he believes in his fighters. That is something that you gotta just give him so much credit for. And then also, like, another thing that I just call out there about Sayoud is I really like that after the previous loss with Neil getting KO'd by Prates. If you guys didn't see this, Neil was like obviously laid out on his back. His eyes were like rolled in the back of his head from being KO'd. And what I really respected is that Sayoud got into that octagon like immediately to like check on Neil. And what I really loved is him and his coaching staff, like they put like a shirt over, or they I don't know if it was a shirt, but they put something over like the view of Jeff Neal's eyes. So like the camera couldn't pick up on that. And I really, guys, like that is such a weird thing to call out, but I really respect that. It just shows the level of care they have for their athletes. So that's a big plus in my opinion. And guys, that leads perfectly into, I am picking Sam Page Hughes. I feel like I am not sold on Shauna Bannon. I really feel like some of the performances she's had have not really just there really haven't been that great in my opinion. Like, I think although she won pretty huge in her last fight, it came by way of her getting dropped badly and then, throwing up that submission. Now, great on Shauna Bannon getting that win. And I don't have any disrespect towards her in terms of like her actual game. I think she does bring solid skills to the octagon. I think that the fact that Sam Page Hughes, though, she is going to have a lot more in her bag from a, on the feet. She's going to be a bit tricky to deal with because she is kind of always like using that herky-jerky type style and mixing things up. But I think where she is going to have a level ahead of Shauna Bannon is that takedown and then also that like pressure on the ground. I don't know that Shauna Bannon is that much of a jiu-jitsu ace where she's going to be able to put Sam Hughes in such precarious positions that Sam won't be able to get out of it. I see Sam doing her thing that she always does where she just grinds out a wrestling and striking type style to a win, probably like a decision, I would think. In this case, I have a 4 out of 5 confidence. Fight number 2 on the card, we've got Brad Tavares versus Robert Bryczek. I don't know how to say his last name. 37 years old for Brad Tavares, 6'1", a 74-inch reach. This is a middleweight bout, so they're fighting at 185 pounds. Record of 21-10 with 16-10 in the UFC. Now on the side of Robert Bryczek, 35 years old, 6 foot tall, 75-inch reach. So decently sized reach there. He's got a 3-inch ape index. 17-6 record with an 0-1 record in the UFC. Taking a look at the styles for fight number 2. We have Brad Tavares, who is 67% of his wins by decision. I have to say I was pretty surprised by that. And I don't know why I was surprised by it. Maybe it's because I've seen Tavares get finishes in the past. But I don't know. I guess I was expecting, when I was breaking down the numbers, that he would probably have more KOs. But in this case, 67% of his wins by decision, which is 14 wins. 24% of his wins by KO, which is 5 wins overall. And then a 10% of his wins by submission, which is only 2 wins overall for Brad Tavares. Weaknesses for Brad Tavares. He's definitely getting up there in age. And I would say if you just look at his record, he's just kind of been hit or miss in his last few fights. Like, he'll win one, he'll lose one, he'll win one, maybe lose 2, win another. Like, not very consistent in terms of getting those W's. Now on the side of Bryczek, 65% of his wins by KO, so that's 11 wins overall. 21% of his wins are by decision, 5 wins overall. And then 6% of his wins by submission, which is just 1 win overall. Weaknesses for him, super questionable strength of schedule. Like, I don't know that Bryczek has really that great of wins on his record when you look at that strength of schedule. And then also, I have to call this out, I do like Ihor Potieria. I think he's a dog, but I don't rate him as like a super highly skilled fighter. I think that he's good. He has good wins, but he's not like this guy where you're like, okay, like a loss to Ihor Potieria, I feel like is a questionable thing to call out because it's like sometimes Potieria goes in there and he looks great and he finds a way to win. Always scrappy, but I just feel like when we've seen higher skilled prospects go up against him, they dispatch of him pretty quickly. And for Bryczek to lose to him, it just makes me question things. Taking a look at the momentum check for fight number 2. So Brad Tavares coming off of a 1-fight win streak, which he just got over Gerald Meerschaert back in April. So April 5th, 2025 when he last fought. Obviously Meerschaert, very high experience, 37-18 overall. Before that, a loss to the Iron Turtle, who was 17-6. And then before that, a loss to the RoboCop, Gregory Rodriguez, who was 14-5. And before that, a win over Chris Weidman, who was 15-6 when they met in the octagon. Now on the side of one fight losing streak for Bryczek, last fought on February 10th, 2024. So definitely some time out on the side of Bryczek. He lost to Ihor Potieria, as I said, 20-5 when they met in the octagon. And then he has those wins over some guys, obviously, who are a lot lesser known in terms of name value. But taking a look at their records collectively, he had a win over a 16-5 opponent, a win over a 28-17 opponent, and a win over an 11-12 opponent. So he's definitely been in the octagon with guys who are experienced. But like I said, you have to question that strength of schedule, especially because a lot of these names are lesser known, especially when you compare to talent in the UFC. Fight number 2, intangibles and X factors. So looking at these guys, Brad Tavares obviously not a home fighter in this case. He's going to want to go out there, though. He's going to have that pressure. He's going to want to get another win added to his record, and also wanting to get, an extended or an extension on his current win streak of 1. Now, on the side of Bryczek, he's somewhat of a home fighter here because he is not fighting too far away from his home in Poland. I think that he needs a big win here because he hasn't gotten a win in the UFC yet. Also, not the youngest prospect either. On the side of Brad Tavares, although he's 2 years older, he doesn't have that same pressure as Bryczek because Tavares has already been tested in the UFC. As you guys can see, I think he has 26 total fights in the UFC. Bryczek, on the other hand, hasn't gotten a win. He also hasn't fought in a year and 7 months. So that's a pretty long layoff, especially being that you're not the youngest as a prospect anymore. And guys, this is where I'm headed with my pick. I got to go with Brad Tavares. I think Brad Tavares is just more tested, better strength of schedule. He's just seen more in the UFC than Bryczek, and I don't think that Bryczek's game has anything that would be completely foreign to Brad Tavares. Now, I know Bryczek does have heavy hands, so he does have that possibility of catching Tavares and changing the course of the fight, whether it be, I could see Tavares being up on the scorecards, but Bryczek maybe landing something that hurts him, because we have seen Brad Tavares get stumbled a little bit. Even Gerald Mearshart was teeing off on him a little bit. But ultimately, guys, I think Brad Tavares is just going to have that craftier skill, especially being that he is the more experienced fighter here. And I feel like that is going to pay dividends for Brad Tavares. I see it going to decision, 3 out of 5 confidence. Fight number 3 on the card, we've got Sam Patterson versus Trey Waters. Sam Patterson, 29 years old, 6'3", 78-inch reach. It's a very long reach for the division that he fights in at 170. 13 2-1 record with a 3-1 record in the UFC. Trey Waters, 30 years old, 6'5", but a 77-inch reach. So he, although he'll be taller by 2 inches, is going to have a small reach disadvantage here. And obviously, very well-known prospect at this point, 9-1 with a 2-0 record in the UFC. Now, taking a look at the styles for fight number 3, Sam Patterson is a very well-rounded welterweight, guys. 54% of his wins by submission. That's 7 wins overall. 35% of his wins by KO. That's 5 wins overall. And only 1 win by decision, so 8%. But definitely more of a finisher when you look at his overall record, being that he's got 7 wins in KO, 5 wins by submission. 7 wins by submission, 5 wins by KO. But like I said, very well-rounded, has a very solid mixed bag of skills that he can bring to this fight. Now, weaknesses I have for Sam Patterson, it's kind of hard to tell if you really total up Sam Patterson's weaknesses. It's hard to tell how much these weaknesses are impacting him at welterweight. But one thing I would say is he didn't look as great when he was in lightweight. He definitely got chinned a couple times by guys where you wouldn't expect. Like, I think Ashmouz knocked him out. Now, I think that was all driven likely by being weight drained, in my opinion. So I think when you consider that, there's not too many weaknesses on the side of Patterson while he's been at welterweight. But you could call out his strength of schedule as well. He doesn't have the greatest wins. Now, I think his last win over Danny Barlow was huge because Danny Barlow, obviously, before losing to Sam Patterson, was considered one of the hottest prospects in the welterweight division. And so I think that the fact that he was able to go out there and get rid of him in the first round the way he did, definitely a very big win there. But you could also call out, Danny Barlow really hasn't been tested just yet either. So how strong of a win is that? We'll have to kind of wait and see. But one thing to call out too on the side of Sam Patterson, he does have pretty low strike defense, only 48% striking defense, which definitely tells a story of him being connected on or hit quite a bit. So we'll have to see how that fares in a fight against Trey Waters. Trey Waters, on the other hand, 33% of hit. This guy is so balanced, guys. 33% of his wins by KO, 33% of his wins by sub, and 33% of his wins by decision. Not really sure how that makes any sense. because there's still 1% remaining. But regardless, he is very well-rounded just based off those stats. It's a mixed bag in terms of, hey, are you getting a decision, a sub, or a KO? It could be either one, right? Because he's got a 33% record in each of those categories. Now, weaknesses for Trey Waters. He really hasn't had a strong strength of schedule. This is going to be a story, guys, on a lot of these fights, especially some of these fighters on the prelims. Just not a ton of great wins over like high-level talent, if you will. Like, there's still wins in the UFC, but it's just a lot of these guys that have fought each other, they're still prospects in their own right. And I think we kind of have to wait and see over time to see how that strength of schedule may change based on a certain opponent, right? Like I was saying, Sam Patterson's got that win over Danny Borralho. Danny Borralho was very highly rated, but could Sam Patterson have been the guy to expose, those holes in his game? And now maybe we don't see Danny Borralho see the success we maybe anticipated him to have. So that's kind of the way I look at that. And then one other thing for Trey Waters, his only career loss is by way of submission. And that is something to be a bit concerned about against a guy in Sam Patterson who has more wins on his record by submission than anything else, 54% by submission overall. Momentum check for fight number 3. Sam Patterson on a 3-fight win streak. Like I said, he's been a bit of a marauder since he's gone to welterweight. He last fought on March 1st, 2025. Got that win over Danny Borralho, who's 9-0. Before that, a win over Kiefer Crosby, who was 10-4. Before that, a win over Johan Lahesi, 9-2. And then before that, he lost to Yanal Ashmuz, but that was at lightweight. Now on the side of Trey Waters, 3-fight win streak as well. Last fought May 11, 2024. He had a win over Billy Ray Goff, who was 9-2. A win over Josh Quinlan, who was 6-0. A win over Jalen Fuller, not sure who that is, 7-2. And then a win over a loss to Gabriel Bonfim by submission in Contender Series, who was 12-0. Intangibles and X factors. So Sam Patterson, guys, is going to be somewhat of that home fighter because he is from England, so he's going to be in the European sphere there. Now, pressure for him on a 3-fight win streak, somewhat of a home fighter. He's going to want to absolutely get a win here in Paris, so you could build on that win streak and maybe you start looking to getting a ranked opponent at welterweight. Now, on the side of Trey Waters, not the home fighter, but he is also on a 3-fight win streak. He's going to want to keep extending that. So I do think that there is pressure on both these guys. My red flag for Trey Waters, I'm just worried about how he's going to be able to deal with those submission threats that Sam Patterson brings. Sam Patterson's striking is also very solid. So it'll be interesting to see how this fight plays out. If Sam Patterson is able to get this fight to the ground, I don't see this being a good matchup on the side of Trey Waters. But Trey Waters has an 85% takedown defense. So very likely he's able to shuck off those takedowns, keep things on the feet and standing. But like I said, Sam Patterson's no slouch on the feet. We saw what he did in a pure striker against Danny Borralho. He actually KOs him. So it'll just be interesting to see where and how this fight plays out. But guys, I got to go Sam Patterson. I think that Sam Patterson is a very solid fighter, especially after moving to welterweight. I just think he's found a lot more success there. He's not weight trained as much. I think that he has been looking great and likely to find a way to get this one done, given that he has a deeper tool bag, in my opinion, than Trey Waters. I see it going decision or potentially submission. 3 out of 5 confidence. All right, guys. Fight number 4, we got Will Gomis versus the locked character, Robert Ruchala. Now, Robert Ruchala, if you guys haven't seen his face, he actually looks like a Polish version of Brian Koberger. So we'll have to see how that goes for him. Now, Gomis is 28 years old, 6 feet tall, 73-inch reach, 145 pounds, featherweight division, 14-3 record with a 4-1 record in the UFC. On the side of Ruchala, 27 years old, 5'10", 72.4 inches in reach. That 0.4 inches, guys, that's going to be a problem. 11-1 record, 0-0 in the UFC because he is debuting. Taking a look at the styles for fight number 4. Gomis, 50% of his wins by KO. That's 7 wins overall. 43% of his wins by decision, 6 wins overall. And 7% of his wins by submission. That's only 1 win overall. Overall, I would say that Gomis is a solid kickboxing style. He brings the solid kickboxing style to the octagon. Definitely has that ability to be a bit of a point fighter as well, as we've seen, given that 43% of his wins by decision. Weaknesses for Gomis is that he can have that, like I said, that somewhat of like a kickboxing, like point style fighting where it can be a bit boring. And I don't mean that to call it out in a disrespectful way, but the way that I'm calling it out here is that I think when you have that boring kickboxing style and you go up against an opponent who might have more of a pressure heavy style, the optics of that can look kind of off, right? And we saw that in Will Gomis's last fight where he lost to Haider Emil. He was landing on Haider Emil quite a bit, but was kind of playing that outside game the entire time, skating the outside. Haider Emil, being that pressure fighter, walked him down and landed on him kind of the entire fight. And it ends up being a split decision loss on the side of Gomis. So that type of style, I think, especially in certain matchups, can really go against you getting that winning on points, right? Because you're not showing that aggression. You're not looking to win fights. You're not looking to win the fight by finish is what I mean. And Gomis, guys, on his last outing against Joanderson Brito in Paris, dude, it was a pretty bad performance in my opinion. I think it was really boring to watch. I think a lot of people felt that way. And I think that is not going to pay him any favors here, especially going up against Ruchala, who seems to be a guy who also can go to decision, but he has those other tools in his bag as well. So looking at Ruchala, he's got 45% of his wins by decision, 5 wins overall, 27% of his wins by KO, so 3 wins, and then 27% of his wins by submission, 3 wins as well. So Ruchala doesn't have, he obviously is more of a decision type fighter given that he's got more wins by decision, but I do think he mixes in those other elements of his game where he might be able to find success against Will Gomis. Now, weaknesses for Ruchala is that he has 1 loss by KO, which does suggest he could be caught on the feet. But I think that his 1 loss by KO was a soccer kick to the body, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know how much that suggests he can be caught on the feet, but Ruchala does have really solid body kicks. He did finish one of his recent opponents with a body kick. So that is something to call out there. But taking a look at the momentum check, so Gomis is coming off of a loss, obviously, to Haider Emil, as I mentioned. He last fought on March 1st, 2025, where he did lose to Haider, who was 10-0 at the time. Before that, a win over Joanderson Brito. That was that boring Paris fight that happened last year. And then before that, a win over Giannis Gamori. And then before that, a win over Francis Marshall. Francis Marshall's a pretty good fighter. Now, on the side of Ruchala, you have a 2-fight win streak. He last fought on 11/16/2024, so a bit inactive in 2025, of course. He had a win over Formella, who was 18-4, a win over Kaczmirci, I don't know how to say his last name, 11-2. Before that, a win over I don't know how to say his last name, 17-1. And before that, he lost to Parnaske, who was 17-1. And then he had a win over Eskiev, who was 20-6. And just going back to Gomis real quick, like I said, Haider Emil, 10-0, Brito, 17-3 when he got that win, Giannis Gamori, 12-1, and then Francis Marshall, 7-0. So both guys have kind of gone up against other guys with, minimal losses and a lot more wins than losses on their record. So it's not like they're going up against slouches when they've been in these different matchups. The intangibles and X factors for fight number 4. Will Gomis is the home fighter from Paris, France, is going to be in his hometown. He's going to have a ton of pressure, not only to bounce back from that last loss, but also to win over that home crowd and make sure they're chanting his name and trying to get his hand raised in Paris. Now, Robert Ruchala, on the other hand, not the home fighter, but he is a European fighter, but I don't think that's going to do him any favors here. He's going up against a hometown hero, so not going to get anything like that, but he is going to have a ton of pressure, guys. Not only is he on a win streak, but he's also debuting in the UFC, so he's going to want to have a solid performance here. The one thing I would call out is a red flag. Ruchala is a bit inactive this past year, so we'll have to see how that plays into this. And guys, I don't know why I decided to do this, but I am going Robert Ruchala, right? I have no idea why I've decided to do this. I just feel like I haven't been sold on Will Gomis, guys. And I just think that Ruchala is going to be coming in as a debuting fighter, probably looking to, get a statement win here. Now, I could be setting myself up for absolute failure here, given that this is a hometown card in Paris, and maybe the UFC is throwing up a lob for Gomis. But I just think watching Ruchala, I think he does have a solid set of skills. And I feel like he's going to be able to bring that fight to Gomis and potentially, get things in his favor, mixing things up. Maybe he can get a takedown. Maybe he can, pepper up the body of Gomis, have Gomis on the back foot. I just see Robert Ruchala being a solid underdog here, mainly because I just have not been sold on Will Gomis. I just think that he has that. It's like this thing. He fights out of Factory X, right, with our boy Cyril Gahn and his amazing coach, Fernan Lopez. Just kidding. I just think that is like, sometimes those guys have this weird ability to like not try to go for finishes and just kind of be like point fighting. And I don't like that. And I don't like that in a matchup against a guy who can mix things up, not only on the feet, but also on the ground. I could see this going to decision, but it's a 2.5 out of 5 confidence, guys. If you're feeling like Gomis is that guy, I would go Gomis because he has that UFC experience. He has that hometown experience, albeit he hasn't had exciting fights in his hometown. I think that he's been there and done that. So it is probably a safer bet to go with Gomis, but I'm thinking Ruchala can get it done. Fight number 5 on the card, we've got Andreas Gustafsson. This is the Bane, guys. His nickname is Bane, okay? So he's going to go out there and take out Fakhretdinov, who is also another guy in the welterweight division that, I'm just going to get to the tail of the tape. Gustafsson is 34 years old, 6'1", 73-inch reach, 170 pounds, 12-2, 1-0 in the UFC. Now, Rinat Fakhretdinov is 33 years old, 6 foot tall, 74-inch reach, 24, 2-1, a 5-0 record in the UFC. Taking a look at the styles for fight number 5. Gustafsson, never been finished. He is a marauder. That's why his nickname is Bane, guys. 67% of his wins by KO, which is 6 wins, I believe. And then 17% of his wins by sub, 17% of his wins by decision, so 2 wins in both of those categories. Gustafsson is the epitome of heavy pressure, clinch game, whatever he wants, right? Like, this guy goes for whatever is going to work. He is always trying to hurt his opponents, though. Like, Gustafsson, although he did go to a decision in his last outing, he dismantled Khaos Williams. From a decision perspective, guys, it was one of the most exciting decisions because he just beat the fuck out of Khaos Williams. Weaknesses that I have for Gustafsson, he can be open on the feet because he has that marauder type style where he's just kind of walking forward. He'll eat your shot just to tell you I can eat it and then throw one back. We also haven't seen him against like a super skilled grappler in someone like Rinat Fakhretdinov. So that is something to call out as well, because sometimes that Dagestani style can still be a nullifier of like this Bane style, right? Rinat, 46% of his wins by KO. Kind of surprising to see that because I feel like I haven't seen that from him in a while. 11 wins though by KO. 28% of his wins by submission, and then 28% of his wins by 25% of his wins by decision. So 7 wins by sub and 6 wins by decision. Rinat Fakhretdinov, guys, he is one of these guys that, and you've probably heard me say this in other videos, he is absolutely one of those Dagestani wrestlers who is okay doing the lay and pray style. Like, he is absolutely fine laying on top of his opponent to get the win. And that is something that I call out. He's good at doing that. Not my favorite, though. He is not on my top 10 by any fucking stretch of the imagination. Weaknesses for him, he has super close fights, and he is so open on the feet. He is not that skilled on the feet, in my opinion. Now, he did drop Kevin Lee and then choke him out, but when he's gone up against like Carlos Leal and like some of these other guys who have that solid striking game, he just does not seem to, very much enjoy that style. And looking at the momentum check, Andreas Gustafsson's got a 4-fight win streak. The last fought June 7th, 2025. He got a win, as I said, Khaos Williams, who's 15-4. Before that, a win over Bryczek, who was 9-1. Before that, a win over 2 guys that are on the regional scene, 13-10 for one, 8-4 the other. Now, for Fakhretdinov, 11-fight win streak. Now, that, guys, don't take that 11-fight win streak for what it says, okay? Because although it does say 11-fight win streak, Fakhretdinov did not fucking beat Carlos Leal. Now, Carlos Leal did get dispatched by the Unk Muslim Salikov, Lucas Tracy's former training partner. That's all fine and good, and, that was a solid win, right? But Carlos Leal absolutely beat Fakhretdinov in that matchup, and I don't give a shit who you are or what you say. I know we have to go off of what the final result was, which is a win in the side of Farakhdinov. And guys, I am not someone who believes in I really don't necessarily believe that I don't think that there is a bias from the UFC on the side of Dagestani fighters. I really don't. I think that there's a lot of Dagestani fighters and, Muslim fighters who've had to go the long way and are proof of the opposite, right? Bilal Muhammad, the guy fought how many people to just get a shot at the title, right? Obviously I don't think Bilal's style is very exciting for a lot of fans, but Bilal by no stretch of the imagination had an easy road to get to the title, right? So I don't believe the UFC is on that side. However, I have to say, and I feel like there's a great debate and argument here, and I would love your guys' opinion, but Farakhdinov, when he beat Carlos Leal, you cannot tell me that was not likely a judge, the judges leaning towards the guy who was from that area or that region or that religion. I feel like Farakhdinov got gifted a win there. And I don't know how you could argue otherwise, because if you really watch that fight, Farakhdinov did almost no damage to Leal. Leal damaged the shit out of him, had his leg fucked up, was beating the hell out of him. But Farakhdinov got takedowns. Or he attempted takedowns because he missed a lot of them. But somehow was able to get the win. So regardless, I just feel like he shouldn't have this 11-fight win streak, but it is what it is. Before that, he had a split decision win over Nicholas Dalby, which is still a good win because Dalby is no easy feat when you get in the octagon. Dalby 23-4 at the time. Before that, a draw to Alessizu dos Santos, 24-7. And before that, a win over Kevin Lee. Farakdinov's best win, guys, in my opinion, really is that win over Kevin Lee, because he did beat Brian Battle, but in a boring ass fight. He just laid on Brian Battle for fucking 3 rounds. I don't blame Farakhdinov. I do blame, that is also on Brian Battle and some of these other opponents, but I do have issues with this guy getting a win when he didn't deserve it. And it has nothing to do with anything around who he is as a person. It's just more so I get angry seeing a fight where I'm clearly this other guy, he checked all the boxes and you were gifted the win otherwise. It doesn't make sense to me. Now, intangibles and X factors, Gustafsson's somewhat of a home fighter here because, he is European, but it's kind of a loose home tie there. And I would say Farakdinov's not the home fighter, although, from Russia, it's not that far away, but I just feel like Paris, France, you're going to have more people probably rooting for Gustafsson perhaps. Now, I could be wrong, but regardless, I think that both these guys have a lot of pressure because Gustafsson just got his first win in the UFC. He's going to want to build a win streak here and get a win in Europe. And then on the side of Farakhdinov, he's on a solid win streak. He's not going to want to lose. He's going to want to keep building on the 11-fight win streak that he has. And the one thing I call out is a red flag is he really just hasn't seemed to do that well with a pressure type fighter. For instance, when he fought Carlos Leal walked him down and really did whatever he wanted. And I don't think Farakhdinov does that well with a guy who can pressure like that. I'm going Andreas Gustafsson, guys. I am not that impressed with Farakdinov's game. I really feel like I said, he was gifted a decision win over Carlos Leal. And I think Gustafsson is a solid matchup against Farakhdinov, because if Gustafsson can show that he has the grappling chops to shuck these takedowns, we should see him do the type of thing he always does, which just walks his opponent down and just beats the hell out of him. I could see this one going to decision just because Farakdinov's obviously not a guy who is easily finished in the octagon. 3 out of 5 confidence. I think that Andreas Gustafsson, Bane, he's going to end this fight, and I'm Gustafsson. The next fight on the card, we got fight number 6 between Marcin Tybura versus Ante Delija. I don't know how you say his last name. I don't know why I did Australian, but it is what it is. Guys, right off the bat for the tail of the tape on this one, both these guys, Marcin and Ante, fought 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago to the date, because they fought September 20th, 2015. And in that matchup, I think Delija, he did lose that fight, but I believe it was an injury loss. So just take that for what it's worth. Marcin Tybura, 39 years old, 6'3", 78-inch reach, 27-9, 14-8 in the UFC. Now, they say black don't crack, but guys, in my opinion, Marcin Tybura does not look 39 years old. Like, he could probably pass for early 30s, so he is looking good. You know, the test of time has not aged him as much as you would expect. Now, it could be because he has that crazy fucking Fury cut that he still does, but I don't know. Definitely doesn't look 39. Definitely looks a bit younger than 39 in my opinion. Now, Ante Delija, the locked character here, 35 years old, 6'5", 79-inch reach, 25-6 record with a 0-0 record in the UFC. Jumping into the styles for fight number 6, we've got Marcin Tybura, who's 37% of his wins by decision, which is 10 wins, 33% of his wins by KO, 9 wins, and then 30% of his wins by submission, 8 wins. And what I would say is Marcin Tybura's got a very well-rounded game. He has a great ground game, great pressure style. Like, once he gets guys at the ground, you can almost bet that Marcin Tybura is that type of guy where if he gets you down, he could lay on top of you and, you know, land some ground and pound. He'll go for submissions. He does have an exciting ground game because I feel like at times he will do a bit of a lay and pray, but he does look for finishes on the ground. Weaknesses on the side of Marcin, he's got a 55% striking defense, so not the greatest, but also not the worst. He did lose to Tom Aspinall, okay? And I'm going to call that out because that's not a bad loss. Tom Aspinall is a fucking dog. However, one thing I'm going to call out there is Marcin not only has a loss to Tom Aspinall, he had a close win over Mick Parkin that happened back in March. Mick Parkin trains with Tom Aspinall, and just a new thing for you guys, if you don't know this, Ante Delija trains with Tom Aspinall. So because of this, I have to bet it from a weakness standpoint, it doesn't serve Marcin Tybura any positives by the fact that the camp Delija is working with, he's working with guys who have either beaten Tybura or lost closely to Tybura. He's going to have a lot more tools, in terms of, like, as Tony Ferguson said, he's got a dossier. I think that Delija is going to have a dossier where he's got more details, right, to go into war with than Tybura would have on him. Now, they have met each other in the octagon previously, but it was 10 years ago. So take that for what it's worth. Delija, strengths for him, 44% of his wins by KO, 11 wins overall, 28% of his wins by submission, and 28% of his wins by decision, 7 wins in each of those categories. Very well-rounded as well when you look at those stats. Now, looking at his weaknesses, although Delija has a solid record, 25-6, it's a lot of experience in professional MMA. He does have, a bit of like that questionable strength of schedule. Now, he kind of has bounced around different areas. He does have wins over Yorgan De Castro, who used to fight in the UFC. But I think something that is a bit worrisome is that he has lost to kind of lower level talent or less known talent in these other organizations. So take that for what it's worth. I will say though, Delija, after doing some digging, he is listed as 6'5", and I believe that he is truly a 6'5" fighter. In pictures I've seen with him training and standing next to Tom Aspinall, they are exact same height in my opinion. So I don't think that Tybura is going to have a size advantage, at least from a frame standpoint. Tybura likely could be the heavier fighter though. Momentum check for these guys. Tybura's got a 2-fight win streak. Last fought March 22nd, 2025, where he got that close win over Mick Parkin. Mick Parkin undefeated at the time, 10-0. Before that, a win over Jahanta Denis, which was a great win. Fucking sound like Tony the Tiger for Mr. Tybura. 8-0 at the time. Now, Sergey Spivak, he lost to. Sergey was 16-4. That was actually a rematch because Tybura previously beat Sergey Spivak earlier in their careers. And then before that, a win over Tai Tuivasa, who was 14-6. Tai Tuivasa, hopefully he's training and getting ready to come back. Now, Ante Delija, 1-fight win streak. He last fought on April 12th, 2025, where he got a KO win over a UFC alumni in Yorgan De Castro, who was 12-6. Before that, he lost to Moldavsky, who was 12-3. Before that, a win over Mauricio Green, another UFC alumni. and a win over Matthias Schiffel, who was 17-8. And then just going back real quick, Maurice Green was 11-7 when they fought, and then a loss to Moldovsky, who was 12-3. Intangibles and X factors, I said that both these guys are somewhat home fighters because they're both European. So I don't know, who the UFC or who the fans are going to be rooting for, but in this matchup, they're both from, European countries. And it could be a mixed bag there. The pressure is that Tybura is going to want to get a win over, the debuting prospect, but also it would be pretty solid for him to get another win over a guy he beat previously, although I believe, like I said, it was an injury that happened when their previous matchup. A red flag is that Tybura is turning 40 in November. Now, guys, the age thing is not as big of a deal in heavyweight, but when you factor that in, Delija's 35, so he's got a 5-year age advantage in this case. So that's probably going to be a benefit on his side of things. And another thing to call out is Tybura, if you look at rematches, he won against Sergey Spivak, but then lost. So it's like he has that storyline there where you could see Delija coming out here and getting that W over him in a rematch, especially given that Delija's training with the likes of Tom Aspinall and the Tom Aspinall camp. I think that the pressure is going to be on Delija to get out there, get a win in his UFC debut, and try to get in the rankings, because I'm pretty sure Tybura is a ranked fighter, of course. And so a red flag, though, I have for Delija, he just hasn't fought these high-level guys, especially that, when you compare the strength of schedule of Tybura, I feel like Tybura has fought some of the better fighters, obviously. But Delija's not completely, on his own there. He does have wins over previous UFC talent, especially in the heavyweight division. Guys, I got to say, I'm picking Ante Delija. The reason why, I just feel like when you compare their skill sets, I think Delija has a solid skill set, so does Tybura. They have different skill sets, but where I feel like Tybura is kind of at a disadvantage is that his last matchup was against another pupil of, Andy Aspinall, Tom Aspinall, and that camp. And so I just think that when you consider the fact that Tom Aspinall is there, you have Mick Parkin there, they are going to have a lot more strategy that they can bring forth for Ante Delija than Marcin Tybura will have over them, if you get what I'm saying. Because although Tybura has that experience, with Tom Aspinall and Mick Parkin, he's not going to just be able to bring in, I just don't think he's going to have all of that extra ammunition there, where I think that is the deciding factor on my side of things, is that Delija is going to have guys who have not only done full camps for Tybura, but they've also won and lost against him. So I think they're going to be able to kind of pick up the pieces and make those adjustments through Delija's game and give him what he needs to go out there and get a W. I could see Delija getting a KO because Tybura is not, not the best striking defense, and he's not invincible to being KO'd, as we've seen. My confidence level is a 3 out of 5. Holy fucking shit, guys. Fight number 7 on the card, we've got Rhys McKee versus Axel Sola. So taking a look at these guys, Rhys McKee, Skeletor, he's the guy, he fucking ripped off Daniel Frunza's lip in the last fight. 29 years old, 6'2", 78-inch reach. That's a very, very long reach for that height, guys. That means, he's a 74 inches tall, but he's got a 78-inch reach. That's a 4-inch ape index. 14-6-1 and 1-4 in the UFC. Now take that with a grain of salt, because one of those losses is to the current middleweight champion in Khamzat Chimaev. Axel Sola, undefeated currently, 27 years old, 5'11", no reach on Tapology, no experience in the UFC. And guys, the weird thing, I know this is going to be really weird, so I don't know why they use this, but Axel Sola he's not the guy with the belt on, okay? For whatever reason, I guess he worked some event and, they thought it was a good picture of him. He's the dude that's holding the microphone. I'm just kidding, but I thought that'd be funny, guys. Imagine they fucking just the random fighters, the dude that's fucking holding the mic in his picture. Why that photo? And I'm using it because I just didn't do any additional research, but it's what the fuck, man? The styles for fight number 7 on the card, I think this is fight number 7. Rhys McKee, 79% of his wins by KO. That's 11 wins overall. 21% of his wins by submission. 3 wins overall. A 100% finish rate for Mr. Skeletor himself. Some notes I have, very, very solid jab. He used his jab to just fucking dismantle and destroy Daniel Frunza. Weaknesses, though, is that Rhys McKee is open on the feet quite a bit, can get caught, can get out-grappled. We've seen him lose in kind of both ways. Now, on the side of Axel Sola, who's undefeated, 50% of his wins by KO, so 5 wins. 40% of his wins by decision, so that's 4 wins, and then 1% or 10% of wins by sub, which is just 1 sub on his record. Coming from whatever organization he is coming from, Axel Sola is a champion there with multiple defenses, so that is something to write home about, especially as a debuting fighter in the UFC. Some weaknesses, guys, strength of schedule, first of all, because obviously if you look at his record and break it down, not a lot of guys that are just lesser known or have not been in the UFC. But then also he's going to have a size disadvantage. Axel Sola is going up to welterweight for this. He generally fights at lightweight, though, and he's a smaller fighter. Now, momentum check. Rhys McKee's on a 1-fight win streak. Like I said, last fought April 5th, 2025, and he got that huge win over Daniel Frunza, who was 9-2. Before that, a loss to Chidi and Jokawani, a split decision loss. Very close fight. It could have gone either way, really. I had Chidi winning, but I also picked him in that fight, so take that for what it's worth. And then a loss to Ange Lusa, which is it's not aging very well, but just taking a look at their records, Chidi was 22-10 when they fought, and Lusa was 9-3. But then a win over Wallhead, who was 32-11. So a very well-experienced guy that he got a win over before that. Axel Sola, on the other hand, 10-fight win streak. He last fought on June 14, 2025. And guys, not going to go through all their names, but I guess I will. Fuck it. Odella is who he got a win over in his last outing, who was 16-7. Before that, a win over Caio. I don't know who that is. 12-5. And then a win over Gasloev who was 5-0. And then a win over Nassourdine Imavov's brother, or actually not a win, a draw with Nassourdine Imavov's brother. 15-3 record. Really sucks for Imavov's brother, dude. I think he's 5'10 and Nassourdine's 6'3. I would be fucking pissed if I was his older brother and that happened. Now, I am taller than my older brother, but my brother's 6'2, I'm 6'4. It's not that dramatic. Like, my brother's still pretty tall and he's a bigger guy, but I'd be pissed if I was him. It's almost like the Shaq situation where like Shaq's one son is like 5'10, but his other son is like 6'9. It's fucking nuts. Intangibles and X factors for fight number 7. Rhys McKee is somewhat of a home fighter because he is a European fighter. Now, on the side of Sola, he is from France, so he is the home fighter. They're going to be rooting for him. Now, Rhys McKee got a huge win in his recent outing. He's going to want to build on that and keep adding to this win streak here. Axel Sola, is debuting in the UFC. He's going to be the home fighter. Lots of pressure for him. We're going to have to see if he can handle the pressure cooker of the UFC because he hasn't been here yet. Guys, I have to go with the tried and true here. Going with Rhys McKee. Rhys McKee only has 1 win in the UFC, but his losses have come by way of either somewhat questionable decisions or just losing to guys who are super talented. Like a loss to Khamzat Chimaev is really not the worst thing in the world, in my opinion, given where we've seen Khamzat go. I just think that Rhys McKee, after watching his last fight, he seems to have really tightened up a lot of his striking, looks really solid on the feet. I think he's going to have that size advantage here too. He's going to be a lot taller, and he's going to have that reach advantage as well, and probably a significant reach advantage, but I don't know for certain because I could not see if Axel's reach was anywhere online. I see this ending in a KO, but it could also go to submission. 3 out of 5 confidence. And guys, I could be totally wrong. Rhys McKee could be completely outmatched, and maybe Axel Sola is like an absolute beast that just beats his ass. But from what I've seen, I think that Rhys McKee will be able to fucking find a win here. Fight number 8 on the card. We've got Oumar Sy versus Brenson Ribeiro. Now, 29 years old for both these gentlemen. Oumar Sy, 6'4" with an 83-inch reach. That is a fucking insane reach, guys. That's crazy. Like, that's 7 feet tall almost, I believe. 11-1 record, 2-1 in the UFC. Brenson Ribeiro, on the other hand, 29 years old, as I mentioned, 6'3", also a crazy reach for him, 81 inches. 17-8 record with a 2-3 record in the UFC. Styles for this fight, Oumar Sy has 100% takedown defense and a 70% striking defense. So although Oumar Sy has been this guy where very technical at striking, but he seems to always kind of be taking pictures where he's not fighting, but he's just like seeing what's coming his way at times. He is very technical, not as hittable as other opponents in the UFC. 36% of his wins by KO, 36% of his wins by submission, so 4 wins in each of those categories. And then 27% of his wins by decision, so 3 wins by decision. Very well-rounded when you look at those different skill sets and that record. But weaknesses for him is he's not always using all those weapons. I feel like he'll get caught at times, and especially, when we look at the Alonzo Menafield fight as a case study, he gets hit, and suddenly Oumar Sy's whole game is like frozen up. He seems to kind of just be taking pictures the whole time, not committing to anything and not using those tools. And so you have to kind of question, like, if this fight gets scrappy, does he have that scrappiness to him to keep himself within the fight and land those shots where he can get the judges on his side? That is, something that I have to question, based on his last performance, right? But if you take that away, he's still a very technical striker. Now, on the side of Brenson Ribeiro, very powerful striking. He also has very sneaky submissions. As we saw, he beat that Nargozai, who ended up just losing to my boy Salty Balls. But he got him by submission. So that was a very, very big win on the side of Ribeiro. And Ribeiro, guys, when he got into the UFC, I think there was a lot of hype behind him because he had a good, I think, Contender Series run, if I'm not mistaken. And I think a lot of people expected him to be a new marauder to the division. It didn't necessarily pan out that way, but still 53% of his wins by KO, 9 wins overall, 41% of his wins by submission, 7 wins overall, and 6% of his wins by decision. It's only 1. Weakness I have for Ribeiro, he's just very open on the feet. He does get caught quite a lot, and he did get brutally beat down by Azamat Murzakanov in his last matchup, which was not too long ago. And jumping into momentum check, it's a perfect segue because, like I said, Ribeiro just lost, and it was in June, so it was not a significant time period off for him. But both guys are coming off loss. Oumar Sy also coming off of a loss in June, only 1 week removed from Ribeiro's loss. And that loss came by way of Alonzo Menafield, who was 16-5. Before that, he had a win over Dawoon Jung, 15-5. Before that, a win over Tuko Tokos, 10-3. And then a win over Alcantara, who was 26-17. Ribeiro, on the other hand, a loss, as I said, to Azamat Murzakanov, 14-0. Before that, a win over Negroze with 10-0, with solid win, as I mentioned, and very active also in 2025 because both those fights happened in 2025. Before that, a win over Machado, who was 8-3-1. And before that, a loss to Godzilla, I guess, 8-0. Intangibles and X factors. Oumar Sy is the home fighter, guys, so pressure is going to be on him once again, especially in his hometown. Needs to get a big win, guys. His last outing was very piss poor, if you want my honest opinion. And we need to see him be an active fighter this time and do something exciting for his hometown. The red flag is, like I've said a million times already, very inactive in some of his fights, especially when his opponent has a way of catching him. He seems to just kind of be almost lost in there at times. Now, Ribeiro, on the other hand, does have some pressure because he's going to want to have a bounce back win from the KO loss. But I do think that this fight kind of feels like a favorable matchup on the side of Oumar Sy, given that Ribeiro actually just got KO'd pretty brutally not too long ago. It begs the question of, like, how intelligent is this somewhat short notice matchup against a guy who's a very technical striker, guys? I gotta say, despite the picture taking, I think Oumar Sy is just way more skilled and is going to find a way to win this fight, whether it be by KO or decision. I think that he is just the better all-around fighter than Ribeiro, and he's also going to be the bigger fighter as well. 3 out of 5 confidence overall. Fight number 9 on the card, and this is the start of the main card. My God, I'm already an hour into this. This is taking fucking forever. We got Patricio Pitbull versus Losene Keita. Now, looking at this fight, guys, Patricio Pitbull is 38 years old, 5'6", 67-inch reach, 145-pound division, featherweights, 37-8 with a 1-1 record in the UFC. Now Losene Keita, on the other hand, 27 years old, 5'9", no reach available online, has recently fought, and recently I mean his last several fights have been at 155. But this is a guy who's a 2-belt champ. He won a belt at featherweight in Octagon, which is his promotion that he was in previous. And then he won the belt at lightweight as well. So overall, champion level experience, 16-1 record. His only loss came by way of injury. So definitely not like the worst thing in the world when you compare losses to others. But no record in the UFC. Styles for this matchup, guys. Patricio Pitbull, 35% of his wins by decision. So he's a very decision-heavy fighter, 13 wins overall. But right there, 32% of his wins by KO and sub, which is 12 wins in each of those categories. Tons of wins on the side of Patricio Pitbull. I mean, he's almost got the same amount of decision, KO, sub wins as Losene Keita has overall at 16. And Patricio is a very seasoned vet, guys. He's a previous champ in Bellator, so he's got that champion experience. And also he's going to have that edge from the UFC experience as well. This is the first time that Pitbull's going into a matchup where he's not only the seasoned vet from a professional standpoint, but also the seasoned vet in the UFC standpoint. Not necessarily seasoned or veteran, but because he's only got 2 fights, but better than Keita, right? Weaknesses I would call out for Patricio, guys. He just has not looked like a world beater, and he has not looked like the world beater he's been sold as from a promotional standpoint, in my opinion, since his tenure in the UFC. Now, he is 38 years old, and he has looked really good as a 38-year-old, but the thing that I question there is 38 years old and in the featherweight division, especially against a young guy in Losene Keita, you start to question, like, how solid is that age going to help him, right? Like, I don't see him being this older fighter being in any advantage there, if you get what I'm saying. Losene Keita, he's a young, scrappy fucker. He's 63% of his wins by KO, 10 wins by KO, 6 wins by decision. Does not have any wins by submission. So that also begs the question, like, does he have a submission game? Does he have that ground game that he can incorporate here? Like I said before, Keita's only loss overall in his career is by an injury. So take that for what it's worth. Weaknesses, though, his strength of schedule, of course, because he's fought in a regional or promotion outside the UFC where he has wins over guys with decent records, but you have to question the strength of schedule. Momentum check. Patricio's coming off of a 1-fight win streak. He last fought July 19th on the Poirier versus Holloway card, where he got that solid win over Dan Ige, which was a huge upset. 19-9 record at the time for Dan Ige. Before that, he lost to Yair Rodriguez, 19-5 record. Before that, a win over Kennedy in Bellator, who was 19-3. And then before that, a loss to Suzuki, who was 10-3, and that was a KO loss. And guys, that type of loss is one that makes me, have those questions about Patricio, given that he lost to a guy who not super experienced, but got KO'd by him. And when you compare that to a guy in Losene Keita, who's actually more experienced by number than Suzuki, you have to question it. Now, Keita's 5-fight win streak last fought on December 29, 2024, so not very active by any stretch of the imagination, especially that he has no fights in 2025 just yet. But he had a win over Paradiser, who was 21-8. That was a belt win, if I'm not mistaken. And before that, a win over Lagerski, who was 12-1. And before that, a win over Bogo something, 16-1. And before that, a win over, I can't fucking say his name, Sardarai, 17-4. So when you look at the strength of schedule, obviously these guys are, lesser known, but they do have very solid winning records in their professional careers. It's not like he's going up against total cans, especially because several of these fights are championship bouts. The intangibles and X factors, guys. Patricio is not the home fighter. He may have that home crowd, though, given that he has all that experience in Bellator. He may be the guy that people root for, but I'm thinking that it's going to be Keita who's rooted for because he's fighting out of Belgium. He's from Belgium. So he is going to have a lot of a closer knit and tie to France than Pitbull would, in my opinion. Pitbull is going to have a ton of pressure, guys, because he finally got, not finally, but he got a win in his last fight. He's going to want to keep building off of that. Also going to want to show out against the young debutant in Keita. But red flag, like I said, age is a red flag for me no matter what way you cut it. He's 38 years old in featherweight division. It doesn't necessarily play well when you start considering that lower weight division. And I know Volk broke the curse, but Volk's also 2 years younger. Now, Losene Keita, like I said, somewhat of that home fighter. He's going to have a ton of pressure debuting in the UFC. Also, Europe being his home. Red flags for him. He is dropping down to featherweight. So you have to question, how he'll fare. Now, not necessarily too much of a red flag because he did previously fight at featherweight. So this is not foreign to him. Guys, I'm going Losene Keita. Although that win over Dan Ige was a big, big win for Patricio Pitbull and so much respect for that, I'm just not sold on his game being consistent at this point. I think he has that game of one time he might do really well and win convincingly, and then another time he gets KO'd by a guy who shouldn't or wouldn't have been able to KO him if you were really looking at the X's and O's. And so I just think that when you consider that and him being, 38 years old and, not having a lot of time off, which could play into his favor, but I just think that Losene Keita is going to come out there. He's the younger fighter, even though he's been on a layoff. He is young. He's going to have power in his hands. I could see him, catching Pitbull and probably getting a KO. But the reason I'm going to call this out, I'm not so convinced on this one. I have a 2 out of 5 confidence, mainly because Pitbull is a scrappy veteran that has that submission side to his game where perhaps Pitbull can get him down to the ground and control him there. Which if Pitbull is to win, I actually see it going that way versus Pitbull knocking him out. But I think that Pitbull is still a guy that could get this one done, guys. So if you are thinking Pitbull, I wouldn't think you're an idiot for that. I think that Pitbull has a very good chance of winning this fight. Fight number 10, I believe, on this card, if I'm not mistaken, is Fares Ziam versus Kaue Fernandes. Fares Ziam's 28 years old, 6'1", 75-inch reach in the 155-pound division. Ziam is an outlier in this division. At 6'1" inches tall, a 75-inch reach, it is not very common to see that size in the 155 division. 17-4 record, 7-2 in the UFC. Kaue Fernandes, on the other hand, 30 years old, 5'9", 73-inch reach, 10-2 record, 2-1 in the UFC. The styles for this fight, so Ziam's 41% of his wins by decision, so 7 wins overall. 28% of his wins by KO and submission, so 5 wins in each of those categories. Ziam seems to, from a weakness standpoint, just seems to have a little bit low output at time, guys, because when you look up his strikes per minute, he's only usually throwing 2.85 strikes per minute, which is not very high whatsoever. There's been guys, as you've seen in other breakdowns I've done, some guys closer to 10 strikes per minute. So that is something to, call out. But Ziam has been on a very good run. He's been getting KOs in a lot of his fights, looked really good. Also has a 70% takedown defense, not necessarily something he needs to necessarily worry about in a matchup against Kaue Fernandes. But Kaue Fernandes, on the other hand, has got 50% of his wins by KO, 20% of his wins by submission, but then 30% of his wins by decision. So really, when you look at his record, he's got 5 wins by KO, 3 wins by decision, 2 wins by sub. Never been finishing in his entire career. Also has a 100% takedown accuracy. So Kaue Fernandes does have that ability to take opponents down. He's done it in previous fights. So that is a little bit of a layer to his game that he could bring here. But Ziam does have good takedown defense, so that could completely be nullified when we actually consider that. Now, a weakness that I have on the side of Kaue, he does have a loss to Mark Jacassi, and it was not a loss that happened years and years ago. It was actually decently recent. It was within the last 5 years. And he only really has UFC wins over lower level guys like Mohamed Yahya, and then obviously Guram Kutsaledze. Guram Kutsaledze was somewhat of a touted prospect, but guys, I think that train has stopped, especially after the way Kaue dispatched of him rather easily in their matchup. Jumping into the momentum check. So Ziam 5-fight win streak, last fought on February 1st, 2025 with a win over Mike Davis. It's a solid win because Mike Davis is a very talented guy, 11-2 record. Before that, a win over Matt Frevola, a vicious knee KO, 11-4 for Matt Frevola. Before that, a win over Claudio Pelez, 12-3. And then before that, a win over Jai Herbert, 12-4. So like DM's got a solid, schedule there when you look at those wins, especially over guys who are talented in their own right. Claudio Pelez is a very highly touted, jiu-jitsu ace from Peru. Jai Herbert, he is like the next coming of Leon Edwards, has the same technical striking skill. Matt Frevola, obviously kind of up and down career, but like solid KO wins that he's had. First guy to KO fucking Drew Dober. That is a big win, right? So, he's gone in there against guys who are very well talented and skilled and gotten wins over them. So definitely liking to see that from Ziam. Now on the side of Kaue Fernandes, I do think Kaue Fernandes, guys, is a very slept on guy. I feel like in several matchups, I've picked his opponent and he goes out there and smokes him. Not several. I only picked Guram Kutateladze, and I did that because I thought having Ilia Topuria in his corner would give him an opportunity to win the fight. I guess not. Fernandes, though, dispatch of Guram Kutateladze with ease, 13-4. Obviously, he smoked Muhammad Yahya, like the first exchange, 12-4 for Muhammad Yahya. Lost to Mark Chikesi. Mark Chikesi definitely was a scrappy vet, 16-7 at the time. And then a win over Felipe Douglas, 21-5. Intangibles and X Factor. Ziam, although I think that I rate him very highly, he is the home fighter here, so he's going to have that extra pressure put onto him in this matchup. Fernandes, not the home fighter, but he's going to want to get a win, guys. He's got he's scrapped together a couple wins here. He's going to want to keep building on that win streak. But also Ziam's not only the home fighter, he's got a 5-fight win streak. He's going to want to keep building on that as well. Ultimately, guys, I got to go for Ziam. When you look at the fact that he has been in there with some very highly skilled and talented fighters in the UFC, even though those guys might not be ranked, Ziam has proven his worth in those matchups, getting several wins back to back, and very convincing in several of these wins too. Finishing the fights with KO. I think he has a submission as well on one of them. So just solid all around game. And I think that although Fernandes is very good and a sneaky fighter on the feet and a sneaky fighter maybe in the submission aspect, I think that Ziam is going to have all of those skills pulled together in just a deeper tool bag where he'll be able to, if it gets scrappy, he'll be able to, resort to some of those other things that he can do, whether it be getting in the clinch or bringing the fight to the ground potentially. I think that Ziam is going to have that experience to his overall skill that is going to edge this win out for him. I don't see him finishing Kaue, given that Kaue's never been finished. I see it going to decision, but 2.5 out of 5 in the confidence here because I do think Kaue Fernandes is a solid fighter, and you never know. Like, he could end up catching him and maybe even getting a win. The next fight on the card, we got Modestas Bukauskas, the Baltic Gladiator versus Bo Krieg. Now, guys, this matchup's a fun one. You got 31 years old on the side of Modestas Bukauskas, 6'3", 78-inch reach, 18-6 record with a 6-4 record in the UFC. Bo Krieg is 37 years old, 6'3", 76-inch reach. He's back at the light heavyweight division, his second fight at light heavyweight after leaving to middleweight so he could get his ass whooped by guys like Brendan Allen. But he's back, and he's 17-9-1 with a 9-9-1 record in the UFC. Styles for this fight, guys, Modestas is a Mo Router, as I always like to say. 56% of his wins by KO, 10 wins. 28% of his wins by decision, 5 wins. And 17% of his wins by sub, which is 3 wins. Modestas has been on a tear, though, and getting a lot of wins by KO. He definitely has. Even if it wasn't a win by KO, like Marcin Prachnio, he beat Marcin the fuck up and then took him down and choked his ass out. So very well-rounded game for Modestas. And, I have so much respect for Modestas Bukauskas, guys. Like, the Baltic Gladiator, man. He went from getting his knee stomped out by Khalil Roundtree to having a crazy run on the regional scene, winning a belt, and then coming back to the UFC on short notice against Tyson Pedro, who, Tyson Pedro is a very skilled fighter in his own right, but he goes out there and Modestas just beats his ass, like made him look like he didn't belong in there, and has just done so well since then. He's been on quite the tear. Weaknesses for Modestas, though, 67% of his losses are by KO. Not necessarily something he needs to really worry about, though, in a matchup against Paul Craig. And I also think that since Modestas has trained with Tom Aspinall's camp, he seems to have tightened up a lot of those holes that have been there in his previous fights where he was losing by KO. Now, Paul Craig, Mr. Crafty himself, he's the only motherfucker who's got a win over current reigning champ in the light heavyweight division of Ankalaev. He's a crafty son of a bitch, and I don't mean any disrespect by that. 76% of his wins by submission, 13 wins overall, 24% of his wins by KO, 4 wins overall. Guys, Paul Craig, this is why Paul Craig will be here to stay. He has a 100% finish rate. This guy is not there to win fights by decision. If Paul Craig wins the fight, it is by a finish. Weaknesses for Paul Craig. I find his stand-up to be piss poor. Like, he just does not seem to do well whatsoever on the feet against any opponent. I mean, like, he's been outstruck by everyone that you can imagine. Brendan Allen outstruck him. And now Brendan Allen's kind of picked up the striking game a bit, but I don't know, guys. Like, Paul Craig is not one that is going to be winning fights on the feet at this point in his career, in my opinion. I could be dead wrong, and maybe this gets clipped. Momentum check. Polar opposites. You got Modestas Bukauskas on a 3-fight win streak. Like I said, he's on a bit of a tear since getting back into the UFC. He's got 5-10, he last fought on May 10th, where he got a huge win over Ian Cutelaba. Before that, a win over Rafael Caue, however you say his last name. And then before that, a win over Marcin Prachnio. But before that, a loss to Vitor Petrino. So it's not like Modestas has been completely undefeated since he got back to the UFC, but he's had solid wins nonetheless. On the side of Paul Craig, 3-fight losing streak, last fought June 14, 2025. And his last matchup was a no contest versus Bellato. As we all saw, Bellato may or may not have been in the running for an Oscar with that last performance. But before that, he lost to, as Joey or MMA Joey would say, Bum Nickel, and a loss to Caio Borralho, and a loss to Brendan Allen. So not the worst losses, but I think the Bo Nickel loss definitely is not as good anymore. But taking a look at the collective records, Cutelaba was 19-10-1 when Modestas got that win. Then Serquere was 11-1, and Prachnio was 17-7, and then Vitor Petrino was 9-0. Now Paul Craig, on the other hand, 12-2 for Bellato, 6-0 for Bo Nickel, 15-1 for Borralho, and then 22-5 for Brendan Allen. Now, taking a look at the intangibles and X factors for this next match, or for this matchup, sorry, not this next matchup. You have 2 guys that are somewhat of home fighters here because of their roots in the European areas, right? You got the Baltic Gladiator, and then you've got Scotland for Mr. Craig. The pressure is going to be on for both guys, but I think the pressure is definitely heavier on the side of Modestas, given that he's on that 3-fight win streak. Gonna want to keep adding to this, and maybe adding into it with a staple finish over Paul Craig. But I do worry about him hurting Paul Craig and then being overzealous and getting caught in something on the ground, because we know Paul Craig is crafty in that regard. On the side of Paul Craig, tons of pressure, 3-fight losing skid, gonna need a win here to not only restate his claim in the light heavyweight division, but maybe could be fighting for his position on the roster. Red flag is just horrific stand-up, guys. I gotta say, I think Modestas Bukauskas goes out there and just the Baltic Gladiator does what the Baltic Gladiator wants. He walks him down and beats the shit out of him and probably gets him with a KO, in my opinion. But, like I said, do worry a bit about Modestas, because Modestas can be overzealous. And it's not a bad thing. Like, he hurts opponents, and he's like a shark. He smells the blood in the water. He goes for the finish. You'd love to see it. But when we look at, his fight against Prachnio, where he kind of rushed in and got caught with a question mark kick, which no one in their right mind thought Prachnio could throw from that close. But one of my favorite moments in the UFC, guys, like, Modestas got clipped by it and laughed, because I think he was like, how the fuck did you hit me with that? But anyways, I could see there being that weird situation, but I do think that my confidence is high on this one, that Modestas gets a win by KO. The next fight on the card, which I believe is the featured fight of this card, Borralho versus Mason Jones. Borralho's 29 years old, 5'10", 73-inch reach, 10-2 record, 2-1 in the UFC lightweight division. On the side of Mason Jones, 30 years old, 5'10", 74-inch reach, 16-2 record with a 2-2 record in the UFC. So taking a look at these guys, Borralho's got 50% of his wins by KO, so 5 wins, 40% of his wins by decision, so 4 wins, and then 1 win by submission. Now, here's something where we see a guy who's very active, right? 7.05 strikes landed per minute. So he is a guy who is active, throwing strikes very actively when he's in the octagon. 62% striking defense shows that he is definitely a bit savvier with his defense. Now, weaknesses, he lost by submission in 2024, and that'll likely suggest he's not as skilled on the ground, right? Given that he lost by submission previously. On the side of Mason Jones, 44% of his wins by KO, so 9 wins or 7 wins. 38% of his wins by decision, 6 wins. And then 19% of his wins by submission at 5 wins. I think I said submission previous, but he has that submission element or wrinkle to his game, and that's not 5 wins. It was 3 wins by submission. Now, so I'm going to call out on the side of Mason Jones. He's never been finished in his career, so he's only lost by decision. He also is a very active striker in the side of landing, right? 5.56 strikes landed per minute in his UFC tenure. Weakness for Mason Jones, guys, he did look very good against Jeremy Stephens and got that win over my boy, the Heathen. But I feel like he did take a lot of damage in that fight that he necessarily didn't have to, because Jeremy Stephens was tagging him quite a bit. And Mason Jones showed he has a great chin, but it still was a lot of damage, and it wasn't too long ago that he had that fight. Taking a look at the momentum for this fight, we've got Borralho's on a 1-fight win streak. He last fought May 31st, 2025, got a win over Michael Aswell, 10-2. Before that, a loss to Chris Duncan, who just seems to be picking everybody off with these damn guillotine chokes, 11-2 at the time. Before that, a win over Timmy Kwamba, who is 8-1, and then a win over D. Salvador, 5-1 at the time. Mason Jones, 5-fight win streak, last fought May 2nd, 2025. Win over Jeremy Stephens, who is 29-21, which is a crazy record. And then before that, a win over a couple guys on the regional scene, but several wins there. Pagani 7-0, Logan 13-7, and then Liassi 9-2. So he's definitely strung together some good wins, even outside the UFC. Taking a look at the intangibles and X factors for this, you got Borralho, who is also from Belgium, and then you've got Mason Jones from Wales. So both of them are somewhat of those European, hometown fighters here. Borralho, definitely a lot of pressure for him because he has that super high rate as a prospect, and he's going to need to get a win so he can build a streak here. On the side of Mason Jones, also a ton of pressure because he has a 5-fight win streak that he's not going to want to lose. He's going to want to keep adding to that, and it's his second stint in the UFC. So he's going to want to, get a statement win if he can, especially against a guy in Borralho who's clearly a highly touted prospect. Guys, I am going with Mason Jones in this fight. Now, this could be dead wrong because Borralho is very talented, but I think the fact that Mason Jones, second stint in the UFC, he's had that experience. He also has a very well-rounded game with a submission threat that I don't know Borralho will be able to fend off, if you will. I can see Mason Jones getting it done in this matchup, whether it be finding a submission or just mixing up those different attacks that he has, because he does have the striking attacks, very solid striking, but also the ability to mix things up when he needs to. I see it being a sub or decision on the side of Mason Jones, 3 out of 5 confidence. Guys, finally, the co-main event. We are fucking 1 hour and 30 minutes into filming this. Fuck. Benoit Saint Denis versus Mauricio Ruffy. So we got Benoit Saint Denis, 29 years old, 5'11", 73-inch reach, 14-3 record with a 6-3 record in the UFC. Sad to see kind of where things have gone with Benoit Saint Denis. I think he was originally supposed to be like the next one up, but had a couple hiccups here and there. But we'll see what happens, right? Going up against Ruffy, who's 29 years old, 5'11", 75-inch reach. 12-1 record, 3-0 in the UFC. So these guys are pretty even when you match up their height, obviously, the reach advantage on the side of Ruffy, though. Momentum advantage, I think, also on the side of Ruffy, but we'll get into that. The styles for this fight, Benoit Saint Denis, a pressure-heavy forward fighter, right? He is always moving forward, always pushing things with his opponent, whether it be on the feet or getting him against the cage, looking for a takedown, doing stuff on the ground. Like, he's going to be in your face the whole time. 71% of his wins by submission, 28% of his wins by KO. He has a 100% finish rate in every matchup that he wins. Weaknesses that I have for Benoit is just he seems to be very susceptible, especially recently, to strikes, right? Like, even when he was fighting Prepelec like landed a couple shots that I'm like, fuck, maybe what if Prepelec becomes the new biggest underdog, right? And I just think his gas tank that I think he was notorious for having in earlier fights doesn't seem to be as significant anymore, guys. Like, I think that his last couple of fights, I feel like I've seen Benoit kind of gas out way faster or earlier than he normally would, right? Like, I know that he had the situation against Dustin Poirier with the staph infection that clearly was not going to help him in any way, but I just think that he has gassed a little bit more than I would like to see. Now, on the side of Mauricio Ruffy, if you guys have watched my channel, you know that I highly rate all of the fighting nerds because I like the fact that they have like an analytics guy that does all this research for them. But when I look at the different slew of fighting nerds, I think Mauricio Ruffy is by far the most overrated at this point. And I don't mean that in a way of shitting on his game. I think he is a very versatile, dynamic, and dangerous striker. Very fun to watch. But my issue is that he just has not fought guys that sells me on his overall dangerous game, especially against guys who are high level, right? Like Mauricio Ruffy talking about wanting to fight Ilia Topuria to avenge Charles Oliveira while he has 0 wins over a ranked opponent. And I don't, not hating on that. I think that Mauricio Ruffy is very clear when he said it, like, I'm going to work towards this, right? But seeing as though you got KO'd by a guy that's way lesser than Ilia, it's like you got to question that, right? But when we look at his strengths, 92% of his wins by KO. So he is a guy that's going out there to finish the fight, right? Only 8% of his wins by decision. Super flashy striking, but also very accurate and powerful with his striking. People calling him like the Brazilian variant of Conor McGregor because he does have a little bit of a similar look to early McGregor. And now weaknesses, I feel like I said, he's overrated. And I don't think he's gone up against a prospect or another fighter who has the skill sets that could bring him a lot of issues. And that's what makes this matchup super fun, is that you have a guy in Benoit Saint Denis, if he's able to stay safe from those KO shots, he has the potential to push Mauricio Ruffy to a place where we haven't seen him before, right? With that heavy pressure style, the grappling against the cage, the grappling on the ground. It could be a very, very fun matchup to see how Ruffy handles it. And I think Ruffy is a victim of his own dominance in that he hasn't had the matchups against those guys like, Benoit Saint Denis, but he's also been dominant in the matchups he's had to a point where you question whether or not he can do that same thing against a Benoit Saint Denis. Now, taking a look at momentum, Benoit Saint Denis cracked his losing skid. He has a 1-fight win streak. He last fought May 10th, 2025. Got a big win over Kyle Prepelec, who's 18-8. But then he lost before that to Renato Moicano, who was 19-5, and a loss before that to Dustin Poirier, who was 29-8. And before that, a win over Matt Frevola with a big KO, who was 11-3. Now, Ruffy, on the other hand, 7-fight win streak. He last fought March 8th, 2025, and he got that spinning wheel kick KO or heel kick KO over King Green, who's 32-16. Great win, and I think a big reason that we've seen Ruffy get a lot more push. And then James Lontop before that, which was a decision. James Lontop 14-4. Before that, a win over Jamie Mularkey, who was 17-7. And before that, a win over, I don't know who that is, but they were 10-1. Intangibles and X factors. So obviously Saint Denis is going to have the most pressure, being that not only is he the home fighter here, guys, but he has to right the wrong of his last home fight. If you guys remember, he got smoked by Renato Moicano last September when they met in the Octagon in Paris. it was not a good fight for Benoit Saint Denis. So I think he's not only got the pressure of going out there and having a fun performance, but I think he's going to want to have to get a win for his country, being that he was the main event last time and things went way left from where he was expecting. My red flag for Benoit, guys, I just don't know how good his chin is anymore. He's taken a lot of damage, like especially against Hanato in their matchup. Obviously, Dustin Poirier, like just has a lot of damage on his chin there. Don't know where it's at and I think that this is a perfect test up against a guy like Mauricio Ruffy, who's got dynamite hands. Ruffy's not the home fighter, but he's got a ton of pressure, guys. He's undefeated in the UFC thus far. And the amount of hype on this guy, like I said before, Ruffy's got the same rating in UFC 5 as Ilia Topuria. So like Ruffy needs to go out there and continue to prove that he is worth everything that he's being rated as. Red flags I have is just I don't know how he'll handle some of those other tools Benoit can mix in from a grappling perspective, because we just haven't seen him tested in that regard during the UFC tenure for Ruffy at this point. Now, guys, I know it's crazy, but maybe you were thinking the whole time I was going Saint Denis. I was going to go Saint Denis. It's a hard choice, but guys, although I think Ruffy's overrated just based on his strength of schedule thus far, I do think that he has that potential to catch Benoit with a heavy, heavy strike that will likely put him out cold. I see Ruffy getting a KO, but I also see an opposite spin to this where somehow the hype train gets stopped maybe for Ruffy and Saint Denis has a picturesque performance, mixing in those different tools that he can bring to the game. I think that when I have to make a decision, I'm going Ruffy because I feel like Ruffy has those skills and a deep skill tool bag to land something on Saint Denis that puts him out. But it could go either way, guys. Like just when making your own decision, consider both sides of that and make the best informed decision you can. I see Ruffy getting it done because obviously I think the UFC is also looking to push him. This could be a favorable matchup on his side, but it could also be unfavorable. We just have to see what happens the night of. But I do see Ruffy getting a win by KO should he get the W. 3 out of 5 confidence. And finally, the main event of the evening, we got Nassourdine Imavov versus Caio Borralho. Nassourdine, 29 years old, 6'3", 75-inch reach. Middleweight bout, obviously, with title contention written all over it. 16-4 record, 8-2 in the UFC. Caio Borralho, on the other hand, 32 years old, 6'1", 75-inch reach, 17-1 record with a 7-0 record in the UFC. Styles for this fight, Imavov, guys. I really, really love Imavov's game. Imavov, although he has 31% of his wins by decision, he is a guy who hunts for a KO. But also what I'll say is Imavov is a mean dude. Like, if you watch this guy, when he is in there, he is fucking mean. Like, I just can't get out of my mind, like, when him and Chris Curtis fought, the way he was just, like, pushing the ref, like, wanting to get in his face and hurt him. Even when he hurt Cannonier, even though I think that was an early stoppage, he is a mean motherfucker in there. Like, he does not go out there to play patty cake. 44% of his wins by KO, 31 by decision, 25% by submission. Very well-rounded game. He's also was born in Dagestan, so he does have that wrinkle of the Dagestani element there where he has that ability and the cardio, I think, to be defensively sound from a grappling perspective, but also incorporate grappling when he needs to. But I think he's definitely a solid kickboxer who's going to look to kickbox from that orthodox stance. Weaknesses is that sometimes he can be caught. He gets not caught, but gets caught up in like downloading too much from his opponents and sometimes a bit of a slow starter at times. We kind of saw that against Adesanya where Adesanya really like just demolished him. Not demolished, but did very well in round one. I thought that Adesanya was whooping his ass. But Nassourdine, kind of used that first round to kind of download the data and figure out where he's going. But then he ends up capitalizing on that quickly after. So not too many weaknesses on the side of Imavov's game. Caio Borralho, on the other hand, 47% of his wins by decision, 28% of his wins by KO, 24% of his wins by submission. Very well-rounded fighter as well. He mixes it up quite a bit. But you would expect, I think, being a fighting nerd, that he would have more finishes, and that it's just not the case for Caio Borralho. Some weaknesses for him is that outside of his Cannonier win, he really doesn't have like super great wins over high level guys, in my opinion. Like that, they're not over top 10 guys or top 10 talent. So that begs the question of like, has Caio kind of been catapulted up quickly without having those statement wins, right? That you just have to see. But momentum check, you got 4-win streak for Nassourdine and a 16-fight win streak for Caio Borralho. Imavov coming off of a huge win. He got a massive win on February 1st, 2025 against Israel Adesanya, who we all know is a future Hall of Famer of the UFC, already in the UFC Hall of Fame with his Gastelum fight. 24-4 record at the time. Brendan Allen, he had a win over, who was 24-5, and then a win over Jared Cannonier, who's 17-6, and a win over Roman Dolidze, who was 12-2. So like, when you consider that strength of schedule, Nassourdine Imavov's been in there with some of the best, right? Like he had that short notice fight against Sean Strickland, who was a former champion. Like he has been in there with some of the best talent in the middleweight division. Getting a win over Israel the way he did was very, very impressive. Borralho, on the other hand, going to have probably more confidence being that he has 16-fight win streak. He hasn't lost in a very long time, but he also hasn't fought in a long time. He had last fought a year ago. So he does have that aspect of being out for a while. Got a win over Jared Cannonier, who was 17-7 at the time. A win over Paul Craig before that, also 17-7. Win over Abus Magomedov, 25-5. And then a win over Mikhailo Lasheshik, 18-5. Solid wins, but like I said, you know, Abus just broke the top 15. Mikhailo was not quite in the rankings yet. Paul Craig was not in the rankings, or maybe he was ranked in middleweight at that time, but not the greatest win. And Jared Cannonier is a great win. That's probably about it in terms of wins to write home about. Intangibles and X factors. So although Imavov's coming off of a massive win for his career, he is still that home fighter where he's going to have tons of pressure. He's going to want to have a statement win in his hometown, especially with the title implications on the line. Now, Caio Borralho, not the home fighter, but those title implications still add a ton of pressure for him as well. These guys are not going to want to go out there for a decision. They're going to want to finish this fight because when you consider the fact that UFC basically said, hey, you know, this is a number one title, you know, a number one contender matchup. But then suddenly you got RDR and Hernandez in the mix. And now the UFC is changing their tune, basically saying like, you know, depending on how this looks, we may have RDR or Hernandez, whoever wins, be the next one. It's basically dependent on who has an exciting performance, in my opinion. And guys, I have to say, although he's going to have a lot of pressure, I got Imavov winning this fight. I think that Caio Borralho is such a talented fighter, very good and very fun. But I just think that Imavov is going to come out there with a better mix of skills and better well-rounded game. Also, more 5-round experience, at least in the UFC. I think that Imavov, coming off of the statement win he got against Adesanya, is going to be a huge feather in his cap. I think that he will be able to win this fight, guys. But like I said, it could go either way because you have a guy in Borralho who's so talented in different aspects, right? With the jiu-jitsu game, he is just talented all around. So this could go either way, but I'm leaning Imavov just based off of that strength of schedule and experience. Now, I know they're going to go for finishes, but these guys are not easily finished, right? Like, I think Caio maybe got finished, or maybe he hasn't. I don't even think these guys have been. So it's like, we have to consider that aspect. And I just think that Imavov will be able to edge out a decision in that regard. But it's a 3 out of 5 confidence. It could go either way, guys. So there you have it. Those are my picks for UFC Paris. Thank you guys so much for watching this and sticking around. I know this is probably longer than you anticipated. I truly, truly appreciate your support. So thank you so much. Make sure you give this video a like. Make sure you share Fight Feed with your friends who are into MMA, because I think that this channel is great for anyone who's looking to have another content creator in the MMA space added to their mix. And please subscribe if you haven't already, so you can stay on top of all the new MMA content that I will be posting. Once again, guys, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.